Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Patton Magee of Nude Party. Nude Party's latest album is called Look Who's Back. This is a pretty wide-ranging conversation. We start out talking about songwriting groups and as a way to kind of give you a real deadline. And I've heard this from a lot of songwriters lately who join these songwriting groups. And it's just, as you would imagine, it's a group of friends who are songwriters who they meet once a week, I think. That's typical. And then they have to each bring a new song to the group and get feedback on it. And it's a way to stay motivated, stay on deadline, get feedback. And I hear that a lot, and how much that really benefits songwriters. McGee's a big reader. I love this, big science fiction fan. And yeah, I asked him at the end, I said, so how do you think being a good reader, Donnie, how do you think being a voracious reader makes you a better songwriter? It's very, very simple. He said that reading gives you a better vocabulary. It's not complicated. If you read, you're exposed to new words, new ideas, and you don't rely on the same cliches, the same words. I think he said something about, if you're a good reader, you're going to find other ways to say, man, I'm lit, or something like that. But I've always said that. I mean, it's a very clear through line between great songwriters and voracious readers. So if you read a lot, then you're not going to rely on the same old words over and over again. And William Zinsser, the writer, has a great book called On Writing Well. And he says that in the book. He said that if a phrase or a word comes to you too easily, don't use it, because you've probably seen it somewhere else. But we talk also about, in the initial stage of lyric writing, he uses gibberish, not words, but sounds. And the gibberish eventually become, those gibberish words, sounds become words. And that's also a way for him to come up with uncommon ideas, uncommon words and images when he uses that gibberish first. And I wrote this down, a great quote. He said, words that you rarely use are a lot more fun to play with. So a lot of good stuff here. Again, the new album by Nude Party is called Look Who's Back. Here is my interview with Patton Magee. Let's get started. I always start with a very simple question, and that is, do you think it's important to create in some fashion every day, whether it's, songwriting, journal writing, any kind of writing, any creative endeavor, or do you feel like forcing that issue can make things stale?
The last week I have been, because I've been sort of journaling more since the new year, and I joined some group of songwriters in Austin where it's just sort of a Google Drive we all share, and every week you have to upload a new song by midnight on Sunday that you came up with that week, a new idea, which has got me the guitar in my hands more, trying to write something new. And you kind of find your mind going through different states where at first you might even be thinking like, I need to write a song. I should have a song. It should be a good song. If I have a song, I'll be able to put it out and it'll be popular. You know what I mean? Like you consider these things, any probably writer does at first. And I think from that state of mind, you won't come up with anything good at all. But the longer you sit with the guitar in your hand, or the pen in your hand and sort of let your mind shift states, you can you're more likely to shift into a state that's not goal focused where you actually can write something, but you can only really write it for no reason.
So how do you do that then if you're forced if you've got that deadline? How do you
Well,
how do you be relaxed about that without do you just not acknowledge the deadline? How do you do that without forcing it, I guess?
it's like I do this, I do like a guided meditation practice that I try to do every day um through this app, this guy Sam Harris, and it's a similar thing where there's a goal that drives you to do it. Like, why do I want to meditate? There's a reason I want to. There's something I'm trying to achieve. I want to feel better. I want to feel different. I think I should. I want to like clear my mind. There's some goal there that leads you to the door. But the interesting thing is the only way to walk through the door is to drop the goal. So they sort of go hand in hand. You need a reason to wanna write a song in a way, but you need to forget the reason to actually do it.
That songwriting group, I've heard other songwriters do that. Who is that? Is that who else is in that group? But you don't have to. I guess you don't have to tell me. But I'm curious because I interviewed someone the past month who's doing one of those things too. Is that pretty common?
I don't know if it's common, I just got added to it last week, I've done it 2 weeks now. Some of my friends are in Austin are in, like, Bubba Lucky or a couple of the folks from, Being Dead.
Okay.
There's some cool really cool songwriters in there, and it's been really cool for one 'cause I can get so, like 'cause I write so many songs, and I have for a long time, and sometimes I can get sort of structure focused, where I'm like, "Alright, what's the verse? What's the chorus? What's the intro? Is the intro the bridge?" And I sort of like and I'm putting the pieces together, and that's a good thing to do, and I'm pretty good at it, and that's not a bad, skill to develop, but then I hear some of these folk songs, I think specifically of Cody from Being Dead, and, it's just like, it's almost formless, not in the but in the way that it's like, here's a hook, here's a repeated thing that's different, here's a different hook, and it just goes from, like, piece to piece, and each part is unexpected, but enjoyable and hooky, and, but it doesn't follow any kind of common structure. It's not like A, B, C, A, B, C. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Z. Um, and so just sort of hearing other people's like weekly mental song garble is influencing me in a nice way where I'm like, oh, I don't have to. I can take some of the guardrails off a little, or I want to. Like I want to bowl without the bumpers more.
The meditation, because I've heard this with meditation. I don't meditate, although I started doing yoga a couple weeks ago, and I think it's a big difference. Makes a big difference. But when you meditate, are song ideas happening, or do you use that as a break? Because I hear people say, some people say the meditation is the way just to completely let things go and not think about songs. Others say when you've got the with that serenity, sometimes the occasional idea pops up.
I'd say that it's like it's whether it's guided or not, for me, it's usually about 10 minutes, and it's like a sort of a 10-minute timer where you commit that during that 10 minutes, you are not going to engage in thought. And that you still have thoughts, but you're committed to the when you have them, you let them go by. They come up and they go away, and that's what you're doing for that 10 minutes. And the funny thing happens is that sometimes you start having like sort of insight, you know? And then you're excited about the insight and you start putting words to it. You start being like, "Oh, I've got this new insight. I should write this down." And and then you realize like, "Oh, I'm deviating from the practice because of my excitement about trying to like, you know, solidify this insight into language." Um and you got to let that go too.
Have you been successful with that, or are there a couple times and you've said, "Oh, I just have to write this down. I've got to break the meditation."
Ah, I wonder if I tend not to I tend to commit to it. Um, Maybe I'll write something down after. If it's a genuine deep insight, you shouldn't really lose it in 5 minutes.
That's true. What about the journaling? Have you journaled? Is that in something new for you, or have you journaled for a while?
I've done it, like, in generally when things are going really badly, I'll have, like, periods of journaling, and then when things are better, I'm like, "Oh, I don't need to have any mental conditioning because life's good." And then, you slip into bad places again, and then at some point you find yourself in a bad mental position, and you have to, like, pick these practices back up. Really, I should just keep them going all the time, but, um, yeah, I've picked it back up lately.
Are those ever? Do you ever get inspirations for song ideas with when you journal?
I don't know, I think it's more like clearing out the clutter is how it feels to me. I think it's like you sit and look at, and I've even had, like, journals where someone got me a nice one, it's leather bound and real, nice book, maybe a $50 thing to sketch in or journal, and I can't put a word into it because 'cause I'm like because I'm like, I have to write something that's, like, important and, like, insightful and beautiful enough to match the quality of this book, and inevitably, I can't think of anything, so I just don't write a word in it, but then I get, like, some just trash paper, and I can write whatever because it's trash, so I just put trash in trash, and that gets the gears going, it gets, like, sort of crap out of your mind a little bit, um, and then you start having and then sort of I think ideas it's kinda like, like an old sewer pipe that gets clogged, like, you knock it a few times and all the shit comes out at first, and then it starts running clean.
It's so funny you say that because there are two camps of writers, songwriters that I've interviewed. Those who the preciousness of the materials, the fancy pens, the fancy journals, that's what stimulates them. And there are others like to say exactly what you said, and that is it's too much pressure.
Almost any song or I'll use my even the notes app on my phone too, which is a very flawed method, but at least it all stays, and you can go back and reference things from 2016, like, that's a nice thing about it. But, like even if a song has 3 verses, I'll tend to just overwrite. Like, I'll write, like, 7 incomplete verses. And you know what I mean? Just kinda roll
Hmm.
with every idea and then piece together the ones that work the best. And oftentimes I think the meaning of the song arrives a little later to me. After I put the words together, then I'm like, "What does that mean?" You know?
And what you say is very that's every prose writer does that. No prose writer would ever say, "Oh, just write the exact number of words you plan on writing for
Right.
that book." It's overwrite like crazy, and you have to, because the last thing I wanna be doing and again, I'm not a songwriter at all, never written a song in my life, but the last thing I wanna do when I'm writing something is y y y not make that choice when I write and realize later on, "Oh, I coulda used that," but n it's gone because I never wrote it down.
Mhm. And another thing that, like, in because I've been just more lately just trying to write, just sitting down and being like, "Can I write a song right now?" Um, is specifically when you get to the lyrics, at least I have, like, a fairly strong, like, logical bent, and I tend to try to connect A to B to C to D, you know what I mean? Like it's all a story or something, and but what I find is that in a lot of my favorite lyrics and my favorite songwriters don't do that. Um, they sort of let the words tumble on each other and kind of let the meaning form in the listener's head, and it's not like and this, so this, but that. It's more just like this, that, and the other. Um, And I've been more and more trying to do that. And sometimes I get stuck where I'm like, I finish one line and I try to start the next line where the previous one ended. But sometimes what I'll do is start, just do like a free word association, just gibberish, just fucking gibberish. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of
Yeah.
like a journaling thing. You just gibberish it out. And then all these like, and the more you do it, the more it kind of starts. Cause I think like when you're thinking with your shallow brain, you tend to use the words that you use in a day. And I don't know what's in our everyday vocabulary is maybe like 1,000 words that we tend to use. And then through some of the free association stuff, you start to get into like level B, like those deeper level of words that you haven't thought of. You know what I mean? Jamboree, you know, jubilee, cockroach, pudding, whatever. Um, and and then those sort of like words that you rarely use are a lot more fun to play with. And yeah, that's a way to bring some of those in, not just have everyday speech as a verse.
But do you ever feel like those words though, and I agree with you, um, that those words can be beneficial, but do you ever worry that those words are not poetic enough, from a song perspective because they don't sound good?
What, cockroach?
Well, yeah, like that's a good example.
Gugaracha, gugaracha, I mean, that's a fucking banger. I don't know.
Uh, so, okay, let me rephrase that. Maybe because it's an image, and maybe I'm thinking too much from a poet's point of view, and I'm not a poet either, but, um, from a poet's point of view, that I think you can go down a road where an image isn't poetic enough, um, or like, let me give you an example. Um, this is what I'm getting at here. So I interviewed Lucinda Williams. I had her on like a month ago, and her father is like was an iconic
Right.
20th century poet. And one of his poems had the words radar detector and cellular phone in them.
Nice.
And that's pretty badass because radar detector is not a poetic image. It's certainly not a poetic word, but he made it work. And that's why he's a poet and I'm not. But I thought that was a pretty ballsy thing to do, to use those unpoetic images and words in a poem and make it work.
Yeah.
So is that ever a factor when you write, thinking, "Oh, it's not it's breaking the conventions," and maybe that's a good thing.
Well, you know, it's I've got a lot of stuff that I'm gonna be sort of the tip that I've been on lately is like if I remember having English teachers when I was and I hated creative writing class. I fucking hated it. Um, because they would always try to get me to tell a story in their very flowery language, and I just didn't relate to it, and I just hated doing it so much, which is ironic because I'm a songwriter, but I hated creative writing class. And, like, they always wanted to I always feel like they wanted to talk about how, like, the desert stars twinkle as the sand lilts across the prairie valley, and all these fucking ways of talking that is not how I think, and it's not how I perceive things. You know what I mean? It's perfectly fine, but it's not how my mind works. It feels like a put on to me. And but the place where I get really interested is not so much that kind of like flowery natural like historical fantasy language, but it's more like I read a ton of science fiction and I really I mean I read almost just exclusively science fiction every day. Like my favorite's Philip K. Dick and like James Tiptree Jr. and Ursula Le Guin and stuff. And I that's much more interesting to me is like thinking of, what it's like to be a miner on a colony on the moon under an oppressive corporation that you can't really contact the people back home. Like those senses of like isolation and oppression and longing from these like high fantasy science fiction stories do more for me than pretty much anything. And so a lot of times I sort of write from perspectives like that, but I don't try to lay out a whole story. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be
Mhm.
like in 2033, the first colony ship. Like I'm not going to do all that, but it's sort of what I'm thinking about, and I just sort of write somewhat vaguely from that uh from that perspective, maybe.
A couple follow-ups. One, is it ever when and again, overwriting, I bow at the no I always mention this essay. This is a great essay, by the novelist Anne Lamott. She's still alive, and I would teach it, and the essay is called "Shitty First Drafts," and her whole perspective is first drafts are supposed to be atrocious,
Yeah, I think I
right?
had to read that in creative writing class.
Yeah, you probably did, and it's my bible of it's a short essay, and everyone should read it,
Yeah.
but when you're overwriting, do you ever think, okay, like enough is enough already? Like I can see the ideas. At some point, is it too much where you feel like you're wasting your time and now you need to go back and revise? Because I could see it possibly being an efficient way. When do you know? Is there a point when you realize I've just gone off that cliff and I need to go back with what I have rather than keep on writing?
I think you can tell when you've got a line that sticks into the melody and the mood in the right way. Um, Even if you don't know what the rest of the song is, I thought I saw your face. If you just know that you like that, you know what I mean? That you like those words over that bit, and you just get the intuitive sense that that sticks, then you can just keep trying different things until more things stick. But I think your intuition tells you when something can stick.
Now, one more thing you said, you're the only songwriter I've ever interviewed who calls the voice memos flawed. Most of them live and die by the voice memos because it's a great way to be anywhere and to write ideas down. So I'm curious why you called it flawed because I've never heard of the voice memos tend to be a godsend for songwriters.
Because it's attached to the supercomputer that's attached to all the hyper distracting, uh, you know, you're. I read like Jonathan Haidt's book, and he's like, um, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's like the most anti social media advocate out there, and he's right about a lot of things. I'm glad someone's dedicating all their time to it because it's not something I want to dedicate all my time to, but he's right about just about everything. He's right. And he describes having an iPhone with social media apps on it as like a monkey trying to play chess against a supercomputer. And it's not your fault that you lose every time. You know, they have a they have thousands of years of technological advantage over you, and it's not a matter of willpower. Um, it's a matter of technology and mental engineering. You won't win.
So when it comes to lyrics, when you're writing your lyrics, I think I know where this is going to go, but I'm not sure. Are you a pen and paper person or a computer person when you're writing lyrics?
I use the notes app on my phone.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, it's flawed. I'm saying it's flawed. I'm not here to tell everyone the best way to do stuff. I'm just telling them how I do it.
But you're not a pen and paper person. You don't you write your lyrics on technology.
Too precious. It pen and paper feels too precious somehow for lyrics. From Because then you got to scratch things out. I like the ability to just delete. Or I what I can do is I can write lines, and then if I'm like, I don't like that one that much, I can just enter, 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 move it to the bottom, and keep going. And maybe I can so I can create like a boneyard at the bottom of the page, um, that I can draw from if I want to, or I can just see later like what ideas ended up in the graveyard, but they're still there. And I can't do that on a pen and paper. I can't write something then move it.
Now, the other thing I want to ask you is do you is it hard to write from places of emotional extremes? In other words, whether it's extreme sadness or extreme euphoria. Some people find those are good places to write from because they're fresh and in the moment. Other people find that, and I'm this way, I think I need a little bit of distance, but where do you stand on that as far as writing about things? Do you need distance, or can you write from the extremes, and do you need distance to be able to write about them?
I can write pretty closely to the extreme of uh, pain and sorrow and betrayal and loss and sadness. Um, I think it like any breakup I've had that really tore me up. I've written a lot of songs in that period of time. Um, Sort of opens the box, and maybe it's a matter of like it's some sort of a self-soothing practice. It's like something that reestablishes like my sense of value of like I mean, one, it's like a to feel better or to recontextualize things, but also it's a sense of like this person didn't think I was good enough and they don't want to be around me anymore. You know, what do I do that makes me feel like I'm good enough? If I write a good song, then I feel good. I feel like, you know what? I've got a future. I've got a destiny. I've got a path, and sort of a self-soothing technique. Um, but if I'm doing really well, if I'm really happy, I won't write fucking nothing. I'll just
Yeah,
hang out. I'll just drinking beers. No,
and I find that fascinating because I'm the same way, and I think I don't know what that is. Like, that's a very deep discussion. Like, why is it that we can write from the depths of melancholy, but no one says, "Oh yeah, like when I'm in a great mood, I want to write."
you just want
Um,
to hang out.
yeah,
Want to talk to people. You want to go, play frisbee.
but I think it speaks to why we write in the first place. It's easy. I mean, if you're in those depths of sadness or melancholy or anything like that, you want to get out of it. But when you're happy, you just want to be in the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, or you don't need self-soothing. You know.
What about when it comes to the actual ritual of the process? Um, are you a morning person? Are you a night person? Is there a certain time of day when you are most effective?
I'd like to try being a morning person, but, generally I mean, I'll strum a guitar in the morning and I'll just, like, grab a nut, just play little Spanish style stuff and sing to the cat, you know what I mean? Little paprika. Um, but I generally am if I'm writing and, like I like, this little area you can't see because I have Futurama for those listening, I have a Futurama background, but in the actual room I'm in, um it's just this little side room with all plaster walls in my apartment in Queens where I've got like, a few preamps, drum machine, keyboards, guitars and stuff where I can just sit in here with no windows and just like demo and track and like do vocal takes, rewrite something, do another vocal take, all just in this little area. That tends to happen, I'd say, from like 7 p.m. until my girlfriend's like, "Hey, I'm trying to go to bed." Like, "Okay, sorry."
Uh,
But
so there is a room, right. So there is a room when there is at least a room where you like to create more than the others.
well, it's the room where all my stuff I mean, I'm in an apartment, so
Yeah.
the bedroom, bathroom, living room/kitchen, and then, like, this little room, which all the walls are plaster, and at first, I was so bummed out because I couldn't get any drywall anchors. This is very interesting for any DIY handy people at home. At first, I was real bummed out because I couldn't get any drywall anchors into the wall because it's this thick, thick plaster, and I couldn't hang anything up, and then my friend Adam Amram, who's also a great songwriter, uh, he's a handyman, he came over and he showed me you can just drill straight into thick plaster, which is more exciting, and now I've got all this stuff on the wall. It's so thick that sound doesn't escape out of here except into the bedroom. So I can really yeah, it's very rare to have a soundproof little room in New York City that gets
Psst.
no street noise, not pissing your neighbors off, no dogs barking or babies crying or anything, no honking. It's cool.
Do you ever notice natural light makes a difference? Does it energize you?
Would I like a window? I would love a window. I would fucking love that. So you can't have it all, you know? Eventually, maybe.
And have you ever been a right through the night type of person?
If I'm, depends. Like, I can't really go later than um people are trying to sleep, but some Adderall or something like that can get the motor revving, and like that can go very late. Yeah, yeah, I can.
Now I'm going to get very specific here. When you're writing with your guitar, are you standing, sitting, or walking around?
I switch. I do it all.
Do you really?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and no, just because sometimes I'm like doing little chores too, so it's nice to have it on top. Folding your laundry or whatever, making coffee.
All right, so that was my next question because there's two things I always ask songwriters. One is I always quote Agatha Christie, who said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. So the idea that the eureka moments happen when our brains are engaged in unconscious activities that require no thought. So you mentioned folding laundry. I've heard that before. I've heard gardening, vacuuming, anything with repetitive
Right.
motion. So how
Right.
often does that happen?
Almost. I mean, even like the last record we put out, most of the lyrics I wrote were just driving my truck back and forth from the Catskills in the city. And sometimes I'll just plan a big long, or, I mean, not specifically for it, but I'll just if I've got an instrumental track and a few hours to drive alone, that's it's the number one best time.
But it has to be, I would imagine it has to be a drive you've taken before so that your brain can truly wander, right?
I don't know. I think it really could be. There's something about like that feeling of like it's there's these weird there's funny like mind states or like processes that are really difficult to do on purpose, but they work easy in the periphery. Like if you're trying to go to sleep, it's so hard to be like, I should go to sleep now because I got to get up early. So now's the time to go to sleep. All right, here I go. I'm going to sleep. It's so hard and it just doesn't work. But then someone's like, you know, oh, hey, can you like do you mind going to pick up the dry cleaning and suddenly, I'm so tired. I could fall asleep immediately. You know what I mean? Soon as like I don't know what it is. It's like some of these like mental processes can only be done in the periphery. It's like having fun. It's like, okay, like have fun. I'm like, I don't know how to have fun. Suddenly I have no idea how to have fun. But if it's like, all right, you two like organize all this trash, then I'm hanging out with my bud, we're organizing trash and we're having fun. But if you just told us to have fun, I wouldn't know how to do it. You got to tell me to sort trash.
So I've got a quote up here, exactly what you're talking about. David Burns said, "A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other."
100%. Exactly.
It's like what you said there reminds me of writer's block. Writer's block, the worst thing about writer's block is that once you start thinking about getting rid of writer's block, it's like insomnia, right? Once you start thinking about I have to go to sleep, you can't go to sleep.
Yeah.
But it's all about tricking your brain, and that's always, to me, that's the tough part, is tricking your brain into getting into those moments of boredom, eureka moments when you're receptive to it, but the second you acknowledge that you're doing it, you're not doing it.
It's I mean, to me, like there's so many things like this, but to me, like the center piece of it is like the mindfulness meditation, which is like you can't if you're trying to meditate, you're not doing it, and that's kind of it's like you have to want to enough to try to get to the point of intending to, and then you have to stop trying to do it.
Has that meditation made you a more patient writer? I'd love to explore the impact. I mean, not writing as you're meditating. We've talked about that, but how do you notice that it's benefited your songwriting?
I don't know specifically. I mean, it probably does. If I when I keep up with it, um, and I'm in a better mental condition, I my mood is better and I cause less stress and I cause less problems. And when I have less like problems going on, it's easier to focus. You know what I mean? If you step on somebody's toes, if you create a tiff with somebody or you enlarge it, it's hard to forget about it, you know? For me, it's really difficult to not focus on if I'm in a social predicament with somebody. Um, so maybe it just it does help maybe improve your social behavior to the point where you can actually focus on other things because 'cause you're not walking around fucking stuff up all the time.
All right, last question. You already mentioned science fiction, and I do find that the most prolific songwriters are voracious readers. It's a pretty clear connection. So, um, it sounds like you take time to read every day?
I read every night, yeah.
You do?
Mhm.
How do you think that makes you a better songwriter?
I mean, I think for one, like, when I was a kid, I remember watching the movie Matilda, and, I don't know if you remember Matilda, but, Roald Dahl was my favorite author as a kid, and Matilda, she is this, like, lonely little orphan girl who's adopted, and, like, they give her her classic myriad of social isolation problems, and she reads so much and she learns that the more she reads, the smarter she gets, and she develops mental powers where she has telekinesis because she read so many books. And as a kid, that affected me so much because I thought if I read enough books, I could become telekinetic. And I would just stare. You know what I mean? I would like read The Giver and then I would just stare and just like see if I could like move a lamp. And that didn't work, but it did create a permanent connection, which I still feel, which is that the more you read, the smarter you are. Um, just plainly, I do think that's how it is, and because you get better at you get better at using language, you get better at saying specifically the thing you wanna say. You don't have to say like, "Oh, that day was fucking lit." You don't have to say that day was fucking lit. You know what not to be a hater, but, like, you can say more specifically how you feel about it. You can really communicate more clearly, and I think that's sort of what intelligence is like communicating specifically and clearly a somewhat complex idea in a way that people can understand.
Do you ever venture outside of science fiction or is that your go-to genre across the board?
Sometimes, like, I had tried to read a few nonfiction things this year. Um, One of them, I read the autobiography of James Tiptree Jr., like, of the author that I really like, Alice Sheldon, and, and, like, I started sometimes doing, like, a BetterHelp therapy thing, and he recommended some books, sort of self-helpy type stuff, but I can only get, like, a few I'm just don't I don't know, it's so fucking boring to me, not saying it's plainly boring, but, um, I wanna read I wanna read about the hospice ship with with a secret core of aliens in the center that are, like, establishing some new world order or, the moon is a harsh mistress or some, you know, a janitor that finds out he's the key to I don't know, the nuclear code somehow. I like that I don't know, I get a lot more out of it for some reason, and it actually holds my interest so I can finish it.
All right, last follow-up. If you're reading a book and you're not feeling it, do you have to finish it, or can you put it down and say, "I'm not gonna finish this thing"?
I try to finish it, and eventually the natural outcome wins out, and I just don't when I go to pick something up, I just pick up a different thing, and then next thing I know, it's on the nightstand for a month, and then it ends up back on the shelf, and there it is.
I used to be the type of person that had to finish a book because I want to say that I feel like if it's a 300-page book and I read 299 pages, I can't say that I've read it. But once I got rid of that thought and I just say, "Fuck it, I'm not gonna finish this," it's unbelievably liberating because now I can read
Yeah.
other books.
Well, the thing is, it's like it's hard honestly, I like reading and you do too, but it is more difficult now than it probably has ever been in the arena of entertainment and distraction that we're now in, always available, that if you then make it an arduous chore, I mean, why make it harder? Just read something you like.
Are you a Kindle person or a hard copy person?
Both. I got it my girlfriend got me a Kindle last year, and it's the coolest thing ever. I always thought like, "No, I want the paper." Now I'm like, "Fuck the paper. I don't care."
I have no romance, I mean, to that, no connection to that whatsoever. I mean, you would think someone with my background who spent years in the stacks of a musty library, and I don't understand people say, "I love the feeling of the paper and the smell." I'm like, "Fuck that." Like, give me a device this
Yeah,
big that I can
yeah,
fit 500 books on.
and I don't have to turn a lamp on. I can pull it out and put it away on a whim. I'm not, like, trying to hold it funny. It's great. I think the Kindle rules. Although there are some there's a decent amount of books that, they just don't have Kindle versions of, and I'm happy to read the hardcover in those cases.
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug. My book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.